So, welcome back to Beyond the Facade. I believe this is our 10th episode.
Woohoo! 10 episodes.
Yeah, 10 episodes strong. I mean, it kind of went by fast and we probably have a lot more to go, but 10 is double digits. So, we're happy about that. I'm
Yeah, we're
Doña
nearly
Jota
in the
from Swami
teens.
Chronicles.
This is Well, I'm Sabrina. I'm Observing Spooks and Other Vices.
Yes, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for those that are supporting and listening to our discussions.
Yes, more content coming. Again, let us know, inbox us if there's something you want to hear, something in particular, because I'm sure one of us or both of us have already been involved, know about it, or experienced it. So let us know, inbox us.
Yeah, so today's episode's very interesting, and we're going to be focusing again on Harbor area because this is kind of the area that we grew up in, and
Yeah.
we're we're going to talk about East Side Wilmas, as it's known as East Side Wilmas. I mean, that's kind of like the hood way to say it, but it's the East Side of Wilmington.
Yes. Yes. Just down the street from me. It technically.
And why the East Side of Wilmington? I mean, to me, I have a long history with knowing the area and probably different times in my life, and it kind of hasn't changed aesthetically. Maybe tiny bits in other ways, but there's a lot to Eastside Wilmington, and that's why we're going to talk because there's a lot of interesting history there.
Yes, it's really the beginning of the greater Los Angeles. And we know Los Angeles was established, in the 1800s, and Wilmington was as well. Wilmington coming from Phineas Banning, who came from Wilmington, Delaware. So that's where Wilmington gets the name from. And so this area has a lot of deep history going back pretty far.
Yes, and we did an episode already on the Banning family, the Banning house. So we focused on Wilmington once before, and the reason this second part, I guess, is because there's a lot of stuff that's happened in the east side of Wilmington, and not that it hasn't happened in the west side, and we'll explain the division, but something about the east side is very mysterious, very kind of odd, I guess.
Odd. It has a different air about it.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. And there's various reasons in okay, so let me just kind of like paint the picture of where the east side of Wilmington is at. So if you know Wilmington, it's not a very big city actually. It's pretty small. It I mean, there's a lot of it's a good population size, but it's not like humongous. Like Long Beach is way bigger. I believe Torrance is probably bigger. I don't know if Carson is, but
Carson's tiny.
so it's small as well. I mean, there's two sides to Wilmington, but it's not huge. It's not tiny, but it's not huge either.
Yeah.
So the main streets that cross Wilmington, like the parts we're kind of looking into, is Pacific Coast Highway that runs, parallel towards Long Beach, and then the other side would be Anaheim Boulevard. Is Anaheim Boulevard or Anaheim Street? I think Anaheim Street. Those are kind of like the borders. There's other streets on the outskirts of it, but those are main streets that kind of go towards Long Beach or going up towards, Harbor City, Lomita, and the 110 freeway. And then the main street we're looking at into is Avalon Boulevard, which is in the center of Wilmington, where you would call the downtown of Wilmington. Obviously, Figueroa is like the border of it, but we're looking at Avalon. And then on the other end, we're looking more towards Alameda. However, it does extend further into a different location of Wilmington, which we call Third World, and we'll explain that as we talk. But Alameda and a little bit below that is Third World. So this area is kind of industrial. I guess it has an industrial element because there's a lot of areas that are just purely industrial, warehouses, There's connection to the port there. So it's that, and then there's like a neighborhood area. So it has a good size, obviously area for houses and apartments and stuff, but it has like the industrial element built in, sort of, right?
It certainly does. And it goes further past those borders we were discussing. I mean, even toward Carson and refineries. So it's very industrial.
Yes. Which kind of like when Phineas decided to move there or start there, it was because of a lot of the port expansion. Well, he created the port and all that stuff, right?
He
Like
did.
that was kind of part of why he wanted to be near that area. But for some reason, I guess where it's at located, it kind of just stayed very industrial because it's like at the edge of the port, the waterfront. But it doesn't look like that in San Pedro. There's not very much industrial there. So it's kind of kept some of the element.
It has. It really has. You can tell that there's a lot being imported at any given time. If you just take a drive down there, you'll see the big rigs, and freeways are just right there, and you can't miss it. And if you go further down Avalon and further down, let's say Figueroa, going towards San Pedro, and you'll see how the whole harbor connects, and you'll see the mass in industrialization right there. But of course, that's not in the perimeters we're discussing. But just to give you an overall picture, look up the Vincent Thomas Bridge if you're not familiar with the area. Try to look on Google Earth and just look. It looks like you're driving or you're viewing like a concrete city and an industrialized city. I live in Carson, and often I travel to Long Beach because I like long drives, or I'm weird. I don't know why. Probably both. I often travel down Willow, and Willow's not quite Wilmington, but it's still the outskirts of Sepulveda to Willow. And you can just see these mass refineries that encompass both Carson and Wilmington. So you can only imagine what the quality of life is in those areas, and who rents, places close to big industrial uh, conglomerates like that. People who can't afford much else, and I'll say myself including. Rent's very expensive now, and it's interesting. It's like where the concrete meets the grass and meets life. It's industrialization and life beings trying to coexist, and sometimes not always, cohesively.
Yeah, and there's a lot of industrial cities, like when we went to visit the Sleepy Lagoon area. I mean, it's all industrial. However, that looks a little bit different, I would say. Obviously more modern. A lot of the industry here in Wilmington it's way older. It's kind of dilapidated. It's kind of forgotten. There's a lot of like auto wrecking yards and auto mechanic shops, a lot of that, and just kind of warehouses with kind of no name. It doesn't have like that modern industry look that some industrial areas have. Even like City of Commerce and like those cities look more. Even Vernon kind of looks more like, yeah, it's industry, has names of places. Wilmington is a little different. It doesn't have a lot of that. There's a lot of empty lots as well. A lot of corrugated fences with who knows what inside. So it's very low key, it's very mysterious, and just there's a odd feeling, and there's a lot of history there.
It feels like it's got an underbelly of life that we don't even see. Like
Yes.
if you were to turn off the lights and go investigate with a flashlight in the evening, you'd probably see people living and thriving in their own strange way that we would never see in the daytime. That's how sketchy it kind of is in certain areas of that parameter that we're discussing.
Yes, and just like any other city in this area, especially in the 90s, there was a lot of gang violence and things like that. I mean, it was not just there. I mean, it was all over the place, and to this day, there's still stuff going on in that part of Winton, but also the other parts. So But aside that, there's still other things that kind of bring it to more like darker type of vibes that it has going there. And we'll kind of describe that. So we're going to talk about some of the oldest history with there's an old cemetery what Sabrina's going to talk about there, and then we're going to talk about several kind of high profile murders that happened just on that little east side of Wilmington alone through the years. uh, and that these are just high profile. There's also been many that just never got highlighted or never talked about. So there's a lot of deaths that's happened for various reasons. And to this day, it's gotten better, thankfully. But because of the destruction that had before, I guess it has that leftover feeling from the past, right? Of the atrocities that happen in that area.
I think that's very safe to say. Definitely, it kind of foreshadows what it could possibly be. I mean, Wilmington has the west side and the east side have the potential, if the community comes together, to really make it amazing. And it's starting to. There's so many things that are happening. We have art walks over there, and there's a lot of stuff that's happening. So who knows? Maybe in 10 years from now, it will really be the community coming together to take the city back forward, and maybe push away some of the industrialization and some of the crime and negative activity going on in there. It is beautiful. If you guys have listened to our podcast about the Batty Museum a couple of episodes ago, so I was a docent there, actively and sometimes inactive for about a decade, and it's still one of my favorite places to go. If you've ever been to Banning Park, it's gorgeous. You have this amazing mansion in the middle of the park, and it's well kept. It's just magnificent, in my opinion. But if you disagree, you're wrong. And it's a beautiful house, and it's a great history, and the history of Los Angeles and what it is today, and what makes California so great today because of the imports that we get off of from Wilmington, from making Wilmington the port that it is today. Right. With that said, there's always death. Wherever there's life, there's death. And there's this quaint little cemetery that if you don't know about it, you would never know where it's at. It's right off Eubank and just past PCH, kind of across the street from Banning Park. It's across the street. It's just kind of across and on the other side a little bit, but it's not far. You could see it if you look up, down the way. And it's one of the oldest cemeteries in Los Angeles, and it doesn't doesn't get enough attention
at all.
It's not beautiful like a lot of the cemeteries that you think about in downtown Los Angeles. It's not. And I think that's part of the problem, is that Los Angeles is beautiful in a lot of areas, and Wilmington is much more, maybe not rural now. It's definitely a town and definitely inhabited. But I think during the time it was much more rural, and they didn't put a lot of effort. And it's kind of unfair, in my opinion, especially because we live in the harbor area. We grew up in the harbor area, and it's sad that it's not as highlighted as the greater Los Angeles, because it's a lovely area to live. I mean, maybe not in the industrialized west side of Wilmington or east side of Wilmington, but in general, the harbor area is lovely. So the cemetery is kind of sad. Actually, it's really sad.
It has the containers all around it, which is even sadder.
Yes, it kind of has a put off. Who wants to go in? I mean, of course, besides weird people like myself, who wants to go into a cemetery and sit by their loved one or have a picnic if that's your thing? Who wants to go in a cemetery and then look off and you see all these containers and debris?
What kind of containers are they? Describe those.
They're the metal containers, the ones that come off the ships from China and all the different countries that we get imports from, and they're just all over the place. And it's just an odd sight to see. It's not something you would expect right there, and it's in the community. So let me remind you, when I talk about the cemetery that's across from Banning Park, it is literally across the street from house. Like if you go and look at your street and you see the house across your street, that's where Banning Park or the Wilmington Cemetery is at. It's literally across the street. And it's on a kind of a main street. It's on Eubank. If you go down further, there's all little main or little streets, little residential streets where people live right by. But it doesn't, I don't know. I don't feel like it's spooky. Sometimes people get scared about cemeteries. I don't think that it's spooky, because if you just drove right past it and didn't know, you would just think it's like an empty lot, because there's not much going on in there.
Yeah. It's right next to the train tracks, and the container, it's like the wall of containers, and then the train tracks, and then like a dead end street, and then across is like a public storage empty lot. So yeah, not really much around it.
Kind of an odd position. I mean, it's been there, so it's been there since the beginning, but the way they built around it is just kind of odd.
So what's the big deal with the cemetery, or how has that been since throughout the years?
It's unloved, and they've had a bunch of controversy.
So
I would like to.
Didn't Phineas start it or something?
He did. He started it for one of his children. He has 5 children, I believe, buried there, and his wife, his first wife, Rebecca Banning, is buried there. And we went and visited them and said hello to them. And
let me see if I could share the screen so I could show them.
Yep.
Okay, so this is. That's her,
Bessie
right?
Banning. That's one of the children. Yeah.
Oh, one of the children. Okay.
At one, it looks like 4 months.
So John
Bessie Banning, and that's John Griffith. And you see the dates. Note that it's 1859.
I like this name. Banning.
I think it's just because it goes together really well because of the double N's and the A.
Oh, this is somebody else. A sergeant or something, right?
Yeah, from the Civil War era.
So there's a lot of Civil War soldiers there.
Yeah, there's a good handful. So the cemetery, again, is kind of sad and lonely. There's not really a lot of headstones sticking out, which I'm biased, but that's what I really like. And there goes William Banning.
Is that a kid too? Oh, 48 years old. Or a brother.
Yeah, looks like a sibling of Phineas.
Yeah, so... Oops. Oh, this is in Wilmington too, though. This is on the east side. But we won't talk about this.
You went a little fast there.
Little place. But so there's a lot of history with the Banning family. So he wanted the space for his kids.
Yeah, imagine the property. If you would try to remember this back in the 1800s, the late 1800s, it was all connected back then. There wasn't roads. It doesn't look like how it looks now. And he started the cemetery specifically for the children that died at birth or died, his children that died, because he had many children with his first wife. And his first wife ended up dying, and she was buried there as well. And Phineas Banning was initially buried there as well. But just like any proper second wife, she was like, fuck that shit. And she snatched him out and had him reburied at Rosedale.
Isn't that weird though, or no?
I don't know. I'm trying to be open and subjective. At first I'm like that, like he belongs with Rebecca, but Rebecca was like the first half of his life. And, if my husband was buried next to his first wife, I'd be like, fuck that shit.
But I guess the idea of
probably
really digging his grave, I don't know. It just seems like, dude, just
a little excessive.
Yeah,
I will say
he's dead. He's not having an affair with her.
I will say that I think that he deserves, and I'm not saying that Rebecca Banning, his first wife who's buried there with his other children, don't deserve this as well. But I feel like Phineas deserves something a little bit more extravagant
So
because
nicer. I guess I could see it that way. Like if it was, which we do have to go visit. I
we will.
The
We have
place is
to.
right there, like in Pico Union area, which I was like,
Yeah.
what?
Yes,
I'm
we have to
surprised.
go.
Rosedale, you said, or Rosedale?
Rosedale. Dell.
Okay.
Uh-huh. We're definitely going.
I
Because
think there's more
now
cemeteries in LA than we really think. There's a lot.
yes, and it's so funny is our friendship that we've had for so long, and now look at you, you're always in the cemetery with me. I love it.
I want a
So that
mausoleum, but I don't know if
cemetery,
I could afford a mausoleum, but we'll see.
well, let's just get a mausoleum now so we can go sit in there and drink our energy drinks and like do our, research.
Yeah. So okay, so the new wife, I guess he died before her, obviously,
He
and
did.
he had him reburied at Rosedale, and so
She
his
did.
family, his kids are there, and he's over there with her, and I don't know if there's other people over there with them, but that's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't research that far into it. I don't know of his living or of his living children that
Like the
made it to
older one.
adulthood. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know where they're buried at, and they could be buried in different areas because he had the three sons and with his first wife that made it to adulthood, and then the two daughters that made it to adulthood with his second wife. So I'm not sure where they're probably spread out, but I'd say probably safe to say they're probably somewhere in California, but I'm not sure if it's Rosedale. But they are together. Phineas and his second wife Mary are in Rosedale.
So what was the controversy with the place?
Oh my goodness. So in the late 80s, early 90s, the major controversy was that the caretaker, I believe his last name was Poland. I forgot his first name. I think it
Mm-hmm.
was no, I'm not going to even butcher it, but his last name was Poland, and he was the person. I don't know if he was the caretaker, like on site, the one who cut the grass, but he was definitely the one overseeing everything. There was many people buried that were not being buried properly. So, for instance, there's a law of like how far a deceased person has to be buried underground. And I believe from the article I read, it was supposed to be 3 feet, at least here in California at the time.
How
That they
long?
have to do.
How much? Sorry, I didn't hear.
Oh, it's okay. 3 feet underneath the surface of the ground,
Okay.
and they found multiple. I'm having a brain fart here. Multiple
Bodies?
bodies, multiple coffins that were not. They were just buried under the surface, like less than a foot.
Wow.
Yes. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine walking to go see your loved one and all like it's a rainy day and it's been a rainy season and you're walking to see your loved one and you slip on a friggin' coffin?
Oh my
Uh,
god.
I don't know how, someone else would feel if that happened, but I don't think it'd be very nice. Also, some people were found buried not in coffins, buried with multiple people in their plot, and a lot of people were not buried in the place that they were told that were going to be buried.
Yee.
And his records were atrocious. They were horrible. He was taking money from families, from various different amounts. They say on average between 300 and 500, and they never got like the deed to the plot, and they never got headstones. And I believe when the investigators came in, he claimed that there was a break-in, and so all that information had been stolen. Because when people break in to the cemetery, they steal that kind of information for some reason, I guess. So it was a huge controversy. And from what I read in 1992 from an article, they eventually righted the wrongs of all I think there was 150 people or 151 people, And out of all of them except one, were able to put them in their proper plots.
Wow.
Or rebury them in their own spot because he just fucked up so bad.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not good. I mean, that happened similarly in Compton with the Angeles Cemetery with, people not buried in the right place or like buried with wrong for whatever way. It's just weird and it's sad.
It's really sad. And in the article, I should have wrote it down, that I read, they said something that was pretty profound. And I'm going to paraphrase here because I can't remember what it said verbatim. It said something to the fact of like when you bury someone, you like bury your loved one and you kind of bury your emotions and you have to deal with it, the loss on a day-to-day basis. But when you have to retake them out and bury them again, all those memories get unburied. They get, out of the dirt and they come up all over again. So it's almost like a double whammy. It's like you have to grieve that main grief twice. And can you imagine the people going to the wrong spots this entire time? And everyone feels different about death. And so everyone has their own feelings. But a lot of people, I know I would be upset if I went to go visit my grandparents and my father. And I realized that at some point that wasn't them there. Not that I wouldn't. I'm glad I would have been sitting there with somebody else, but I came there to see my grandparents and my father. So I can understand how people would be very upset. It would be very upsetting, traumatizing even.
Was there something, I'm not sure if I read it right. Was there something about like the soil messing up or like the ground, like sinking in or something?
I don't recall reading that. I do recall the issue with the coffins not being buried low enough.
Yeah.
So they may have become exposed, and maybe that's what you're thinking. And maybe either what you're referring to, I just don't recall it. There was a lot of things wrong. They weren't burying the coffins properly, or bodies were being buried in the lining and not the coffin, and things like that. So there was a bunch of strange things going on, and not to mention the amounts of money that these people were out without their official deeds to the plots and without headstones.
So yeah, I think it connects with what you said because I'm reading here. The soil at historic Wilmington Cemetery is so damp from the rain this winter that the grave markers are sinking. So
got it.
Most of the affected graves, about 15 to 20, were for recent burials. Okay, so
that had to have been a long time ago because it hasn't rained here in like fucking years.
Yeah, this is from 2017, which is
wow, that was
not that long ago, I guess. Yeah, I guess whatever's happening is not, they're not burying these bodies correctly. If just rain is gonna cause that issue, right? It shouldn't, at least. When you go to cemetery, you shouldn't expect that, unless we're in a Louisiana where they gotta bury them differently, right? Because of
for flood water and stuff like that. I mean, it's hard to say because we don't experience rain at that kind of a level over here in California in this area. So maybe the cemetery just wasn't prepared for that. Rain. Yeah. It's hard to say. But in general, it's just a sad little forgotten cemetery. Right. I would also like to add that I was someone did reach out to me to tell me a little bit of a story that she had an experience. And thank you, viewers, for inboxing us and letting us know your stories. So Cecilia, she said I'm pulling it up, guys. So in case you think I'm looking off the side, I'm pulling it up. She said that she was at a craft day at the cemetery for Day of the Dead. And she heard chitter chatter, as what she described as chitter chatter, all around with a very heavy energy around where they were at. And she couldn't place it. There were kids, but not a lot of kids to make that chitter chatter. And she made it seem like they were kids with the chitter chatter. And she also has a couple of friends that are buried there. And she said that she doesn't regularly feel spiritual things, but she felt negative presence or negative feelings or energy off of potential spirits surrounding her, because and she thinks it's because that they were buried in the wrong place and they're trying to find where they're buried and trying to alert their family where they're buried.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, if it's already been an issue since the 80s, then could be that maybe her family or loved one is also not in the right place. Who knows?
That's what she's thinking. And thank you so much, Cecilia, for reaching out to us and giving us your experience.
Yeah, definitely. So, in general, for you, because I know you really love Banning and his history, what is like the thought of this place for you? Because it's connected to that, and what? Because I know you love cemeteries, but this one again is not that, I guess, attracting. I would say, but it has that history in it too. So,
Yes. And I think that for someone to be a lover of the cemetery and to someone who communes with the dead on a regular basis, that I can be a cemetery snob, but I shouldn't be. And I think that I can appreciate the architecture and all the extra stuff that they have on these amazing cemeteries. And Wilmington Cemetery has none of it. It lacks quite a bit. But the connection to the Banning, one of the oldest cemeteries in Los Angeles, and it's not far from me. And if you recall, when we went there just recently, we went, what, a couple weeks ago, we sat there on the little cement bench probably for an hour, and it had the loveliest breeze. And I can't discount that. It was a lovely little spot. And I think that I want to make an effort to try to be a part of the cemetery a little bit more, because I feel like I've neglected it. One of my favorite cemeteries is just down the way. It's on Sunnyside or the Long Beach Municipal, because there are two of them right next to each other. And they're amazing, and they look amazing with the headstones coming out, and it's open, and I love that cemetery. But I think that it's also good to come back and be where it all started and really pay attention and love on the cemetery that is connected to the family that I care about so deeply, or the dead family of the Mannings, because I don't know any living ones.
right. So yeah, so that's the history of the cemetery. So the next stories we're gonna kind of comment on are, just like I said, the high profile, you know, I guess crimes that have happened. For some reason, they're always connected to the east side. So the the first one that happened in the 90s was in 1995. There was two employees of Ramona's Bakery. And Ramona's Bakery is an old bakery from the 30s that used to be in San Pedro, the old Art Deco building actually on Pacific, and it was known for their birthday cakes or whatnot. It closed down probably early 2000s, if that, I think, but it was a well-known bakery here in San Pedro, and they had two employees named Rosa Maria, she was 37, and Rutilio Ramirez, he was 42, and they worked at the bakery for about 10 years. And the story goes that they had a van and they were gathering like clothing and different items because they were going to give them to TJ. They were going to go to Mexico, wherever they're from, not TJ's, wherever they're from, to donate to families in need over there. So, I mean, they had donations from people that, you know, they were no, they knew that they were going to go to Mexico and give those donations. But I guess one night after getting off work, they never returned home, and they did have family, like children, I guess maybe young and some adolescent age. So they were going to be aware of like, why aren't our parents home, right?
Yeah.
And somehow it was obviously reported that they were missing. And I don't know the time frame of when they found them, but they were found in the east side on M Street, which is down there, kind of industrial area, in their van, and they were pretty much murdered, kind of execution style. So
Wow.
very up close. It didn't it didn't show that they were robbed though, like for their stuff or anything, which is very odd. And it
Yeah,
wasn't like a suicide or nothing because there's no weapons found or anything like that. And they were pretty good, normal people. So it's unsolved. It was never solved, or there's no trace of what could have happened.
how sad.
Yeah, and this was they were found in the area, I believe, more towards third world, which third world is strictly industrial. It's mostly like scrap yards, auto dismantling, anything auto. I think there's a strip club down there. It's very grimy, and we used to go down there for graffiti related purposes. But there's a couple of streets down. I mean, there are streets, and the streets are actually dirt roads. Some of them, they were never like actually paved streets, so that's why we called it third world, because some of the streets were just never paved, and you don't see sidewalks.
Which
So
is
it was very
crazy.
underdeveloped.
And that's where they were found, in that area.
Yes, there is one street in third world that has houses, only like 3 houses on that street. It's very, really rural back there. And then a refinery all around it. It's trippy. But they were found there and just never solved. So just a really sad, sad case.
Very sad.
Yeah. And then the next one is Monique Arroyo, and we did mention her in the Banning episode because she actually was a young girl, I think 12 years old at the time, and she lived across the street from Banning House in one of the kind of big mansion looking homes, or they're just big. There's a lot of like colonial style homes there.
Yes, that's very cute. I suggest you go take a drive down there, and I will plug Victorian Christmas in December. Sorry about that,
Yeah.
but
There's like
it's
one or
lovely.
two streets with like nice like colonial houses. It's a mixture of architecture, but there's a couple of like houses that kind of match the
Yeah, some
area of the back.
storybook, even maybe the tutor here and there. It's really cute.
Right. So this young lady or young girl was living with her family there, and I guess they were gonna film a movie in her house because her house again looked very unique on the outside, very old school. So whatever movie or film they were gonna do, they were gonna use her house as a scene of some sort. And the director or producer was gonna allow her to be like in a background or something of the film. So she was really excited. She shared with her friends at school. She was going to school down the street at the Catholic school, Holy Family on L Street, and she was going to be filming the next day. But then that same night, she was found missing. I guess in the middle of the night. I'm not sure like why her mom ended up checking on her. I don't know if she typically checked on her or it was right before she went to bed or whatnot, and found that she was missing from her bed. And I think they found her blanket in the driveway. So it became obviously a huge thing, and she she was missing for like 3 or 4 days, and it was on the news. All the neighborhood was involved. It was even where across the county people were helping to try to look for her, or even further, because it was like a huge, like wow, it was really scary, right?
Yes.
But this girl was just missing from her room. So what was happening? Well, it ends up that they found her, unfortunately, rolled up in a carpet or like some kind of blanket, maybe a thick carpet or blanket, in a lot on the east side as well, on a street called Dominguez near Anaheim, which is an empty lot. They found her body, nude, and there were signs of abuse and all that. 4 days later, they found her body there. And they ended up, through the whole investigation and everything, they ended up pinpointing it on her uncle, which was the brother of the mother. And his name was Eloy Loy. I'm not sure why that name's kind of odd, but Eloy Loy. And it was just odd because The uncle had already done 14 years in prison for rape and assault prior, but because the other the whoever his family, like, I mean, they didn't really know that he had these charges. It was kind of kept hush hush, so that's why they had him around, like, like he was just like the cool uncle or the nice uncle at the time, right? It wasn't. They didn't really know his history apparently, and yeah, so he struck again, and he committed that crime, unfortunately, and he is currently on death row. He's still appealing the case to this day, 2020, the last time he appealed. But did you ever hear that story?
Yes, it's cloudy. It's cloudy. And what year was that again? Could you remind us?
1996.
It's very cloudy because that's the year my daughter was born.
Uh-huh.
My oldest daughter. So that was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cloudy. I vaguely remember it. Very vaguely, though.
I didn't hear about it at the time. I heard about it way later.
Well, definitely
Go ahead.
It's definitely your worst nightmare.
Yeah. But now looking at it now, it's interesting because that lot where she was found, that lot is still that lot. Like till this day. And that's the thing about we were saying about the east side, like there hasn't been a lot of redevelopment at all through the years to use some of these empty lots for maybe more housing or something else. They literally been empty lots that have no welcome sign to it.
It looks almost like a modern urban ghost town in some areas. Just like there's no life except the grass that's growing out of the cracks of the cement.
Right. It's not even like maybe if it's gonna be empty, okay, make it a park or something, right?
Yes.
But no, it's a bland lot with trash and those thick, heavy weeds that poke your skin. Anyhow, that lot, I had friends that lived on the east side growing up, and we would go near that lot, just to do teenage things like smoke and experiment with smoking. And I remember going into that lot with maybe 2 or 3 friends. My other friend, a girl, Sunny, and then one of our 2 guy friends. And we were in the lot just smoking or whatnot. And we were in between containers because there used to be containers there. There was a lot of dumping that happens in the east side, like trash dumping. And there was like random containers and stuff everywhere. Like nobody's gonna tell you to move it. Like who's gonna tell you?
Yeah. On what authority?
Right.
Like who's gonna even see it?
Yeah, and while we were there was a weirdo. We'll just call him that. That came up to one of my friends and he was like trying to solicit us young girls, and we got so upset that he said that. He's trying to solicit, favors or whatnot, and we started throwing stuff at him and we ran like, let's get the hell out of here.
Well, yeah, of course. That's disgusting.
And we ran, and we're only 15, we're kids, and we're throwing stuff at him and calling him stuff. And he was a grown man. He was in like even if he was a teenager, but still he was a grown man. So there's always like weird shady stuff going on in some of these lots and stuff. And it's fortunately that she was found like in that lot, like a few years prior to us going to that lot. I think we went around 98. She was found in 96. But yeah, so I'm not sure what happened with the family of Monique, if they stayed there or if they moved away. I mean, I'm not sure. After that time, it just there's no other follow-up on that. I don't know if any of you guys know this family, but hopefully they're doing okay, because that's a really sad story.
Very sad.
Yeah, so another thing we wanted to talk about was, I guess it's infamous or famous, I don't know how you want to say it, L Street. Why L Street?
I don't know. Maybe because it's like a little bend. The L. I'm talking about the L. That was a really silly analogy, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so L Street is also kind of like the main street that usually people go down into. It's not the only street, but it's a main street that cuts in between Anaheim and then PCH. So it's another kind of main street people go they use to get down to the east side. And I mean, L Street is also famous because there was a gang that took that territory, the L Street territory. But there's several other gangs through the area, but that was one of them. So I guess it was always mentioned because of that too. But a lot of stuff has happened on L Street for some reason. I mean, L Street has it's almost been like a boulevard of sorts, even though it's not a boulevard. It's just a residential street.
Maybe because it's more of a main one that more traveled on. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So the next thing that happened there was, let's fast forward to 2009, and again there has been a lot of stuff on L Street that just wasn't documented or was very brief, right? There's been a lot of like shootings and things like that. So throughout the time there's been others besides what we mentioned, but in 2009 there was a very scary incident with the murder suicide. um
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was very trippy. And I remember hearing that on the news. I don't know if you did when that first came out.
I did. I remember it, but I didn't take it so personal like as I do now in a sense.
Right. So this happened in 2009. And at first I thought it was because it was like the recession time, right? So it was a family, husband, wife, and 5 children. It was not just one, it was 5. And I had heard back then that supposedly the guy got, laid off or something because of recession and couldn't handle it and ended up, killing the family, which is still not acceptable, right? But that's kind of
Never.
what I thought it was.
Uh huh.
What the research, it was similar, but him and his wife both worked at Kaiser Permanente in West LA somewhere, and they
Okay.
were both X-ray technicians. And I guess they got caught doing some fraudulent paperwork. I guess to get like some kind of a low income daycare or something like that. So they forged some documents. I'm not sure what they forged. Maybe some documents. I'm not sure if it was for them or other people, but somehow they got caught up with forging documents, and they both got fired. Mind you, it was during the recession, so that's kind of where I thought it, or maybe they said that they got fired for some reason, right?
It makes sense. Yeah. It's similar.
Right. So they got fired, and he was pretty much like lost control or like enraged of what happened, like kind of was not accepting what happened for probably various reasons. Maybe they were going to lose their home. I don't know. Obviously some people take workplace grievances really, really hard. I mean, you always hear those stories like people going back and shooting up a workplace or something.
I mean, they even have a catchphrase going postal, you know?
Right, right. And I can't even imagine doing that, but some people, I guess, are emotionally unregulated when it comes to that, or they don't think that things will get better again, and who knows what goes through their mind, right?
Yeah.
So he ended up pretty much, I don't know there's no logic behind what he did, but he ended up killing his wife and all 5 children. And then I believe he called the news and pretty much said, I killed my wife and children. Like he told them. I don't know if he told them the reason he got fired or whatnot, but he kind of like reported himself. And by the time they went to the home to find him or stop it or whatever to do something about it, he had killed himself. So yeah, that was,
What a waste of life.
yeah. And that was right there on McFarland and L Street, like literally a few blocks away from the main L Street. And
Yeah.
kind of a newer type of home. I believe they owned the home. We passed by, right?
We did.
What do you think of the little area right there?
I mean, that whole area off of L Street, that whole section is kind of odd. Off. I mean, you got that industrial area on the other side of the residence. You know, like where. Remember years ago, you and I went and our friend, and I want to say it was just in the nighttime and with a big empty lot with like construction stuff, and then it's not too much different now, but it's a little different. It's just weird there. It's just not a good feeling there. But specifically around this house that you're referring to, I think I got more emotionally sad. I don't think I sensed anything paranormal at the moment because again, we were just in the car passing by. We try to, respect people and their privacy, and it's fully loaded. And what I mean by fully loaded is fully loaded with another family or multiple family living.
Mhm.
So you can't help but wonder if they were told
Yeah.
about what happened in this house, or if they knew about it. I hope they were given some kind of major discount because I of course I want to live in a lovely big Victorian with a couple of nice ghosts, but I don't know if I want like 7 or 8 in the middle of trauma and stuff like that.
Right.
It's just it's a sad place, and if you've ever lived anywhere where there's been death, sometimes that echo imprints itself on the energy of the entire facade of the house, the inside of the house, the whole energy that you breathe inside the house as a family. And can you imagine how sad and melancholy that could be?
Yes. And that's a good point that I think I have read that the realtor has to tell you if somebody died within a certain amount of time,
Yes.
maybe like 5, 10 years, I don't know, which I think they probably do legally, but did they also give a huge discount because most people weren't going to want to live in a house that happened in? Maybe.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Because, I
I
mean,
wouldn't, I don't think I would want that. I guess it depends what kind of like skin you have with that or how much you would care. I don't know. What do you like?
I don't know. You see, I know this sounds really silly, but like, I don't mind going to some old Victorian, even if there was like a murder or a murder suicide. Of course, not as heinous with the millions of kids, and I don't want to trivialize it, but like something older as like 100 years old, or older as like nearly, a whole century. However, something so modern, like something that's so fresh in our psyche that happened not that long ago and way too close to home, literally and figuratively, I don't think I would want to be attached to that. And I think that if
Mhm.
it was an offer, it would have to be a pretty fucking good offer, like a pretty like notable amount knocked off for me to even want to like go in and like lay my head to rest. Because I'd always think like, I wonder which room it happened in. Like, I
Probably all of
wonder.
them. If they have so
It,
many kids, like
well, it
probably all of them.
depends. I mean, did he grab them all together, or were they all separate rooms? I mean, that's the things that I would think about. And then I would probably, as an investigator and as someone who has, is more sensitive, I would probably feel things if there's something there. And hopefully they moved on. Hopefully they're not lingering.
Yeah.
But even let's say if there was paranormal activity, I would probably already imagine it would be from them, which may not even be accurate. It could be from something previous. But I don't think I would ever feel fully settled there. I would feel kind of a little bit on edge.
No, I
I,
agree. I
I
agree.
don't think I would want to move there, personally.
No.
There's
But
nothing
hopefully, I mean,
significant
rest
about
in
it.
peace to that whole family. I mean,
Definitely.
including him, hopefully he was able to make peace with what he did, or I mean, the poor innocent children. So, I mean, again, we never heard anything. We never heard if there was any other family that was connected with them or anything. I mean, I'm sure they probably feel terrible as well.
I'm sure. Again, just a massive loss of life for no real good reason. And it's really sad. But the building isn't significant. It isn't old and it's not beautiful. And I don't think you could pay me to live there. At least not with my own children. Maybe as like a second home to like do experiments in, but not with my own family.
Right. So, like, also with the L Street, like, I remember going to the church when I was a kid, called Holy Family, which is literally down the street. So during that time, it was like we would be at the church, but it was really like prime time for gang violence at the time. So we had to everybody had to be careful where they parked and like where you were walking. And during that time, again, there was a lot of like deaths because of like the activity. I guess the rivalry between the east and west side of Wilmington, I don't know if anybody knows like a documented fact, but there was a couple of things I read that it happened in the late 80s. It started in the late 80s. If you guys know when that started, let us know, because
Yes, educate us. We want to know.
I heard it started in the late 80s between due to a girl, and I don't know if that's the truth, but
Who knows? I mean, there's probably truth in the 80s. It was pretty active, in Los Angeles in general in the 80s. But wow.
because I guess at one time they were all united and then it split up, supposedly. So if you guys want to educate us on that history, let us know. So the next one that I want to bring up is one that it's kind of a little bit more present to this day, and it was the murder of Christy Alvarez. And that happened. Actually, let's go backtrack a little bit. Let's go to Quinceañera.
Okay.
Because that happened in 2010, and then we'll go back to Christy. So another thing that kind of tainted that part was the Quinceañera, sex offender, well, shall we say.
Yeah. Everyone who's ever been to Wilmington, at least been down Avalon, the main downtown Wilmington, I'm sure has seen the big old brick building, and it's a quinceañera shop. They make clothes there. I've had clothes altered there before.
Dresses and stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, not just. Well, I had a dress made for a vampire ball once, or added on to at least and altered. But yeah, multiple times I've been there as a customer. And then a couple of times I've also been into the venue. If you didn't know, it's 2-story, and it doubles as it moonlights. So during the week, it's this bustling quinceañera shop where they have the tuxes and the dresses and all the extras that you may need. And then on top, during the weekend, it becomes a venue for quinceañeras or baptismos or whatever they rent it out for. And so I've also been a guest to multiple quinceañeras up there. And it's a death trap. Because if you've ever walked and gone in the alley behind it where you get into the upstairs, it's this really old rickety staircase to get up there. And
in heels?
I did wear heels at one time. Back in the day, I'd wear heels. And it was ridiculous and scary trying to get up there.
Yeah, so the reason we're bringing this up, and this was not a murder, but it was a very horrible act. It led to a conviction. So it's not like we're alleging anything, but
no,
it led to a conviction. And basically, the son of the owners of that shop, his name is Carlos Aguirre Jr. He was convicted in around 2010 of like multiple counts of rape and molestation of his nieces, or there were several, I believe, but one for very long term since she was like 5 years old. And it's very unfortunate because inflicted a lot of trauma, and he ended up, I think it was more than 10 counts of these acts, but he used to be the videographer or videographer. Yeah, for the quinceañeras and all the events that would happen for that shop.
It's not. I see it. Offenders like these, they're predators, so they know exactly how to approach their prey.
Yeah, so everybody knew him as a doing this videography and taking photos of, the people that were having the parties there, whether it's a quinceañera or other special event. But behind the scenes, he was obviously inflicting this abuse towards his own family members. And I guess he ended up getting caught because again, with any kind of predators like this, it's 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 always hard for them to get prosecuted because you need hard evidence, right? There's always a lot of he said, she said, or whatever, whoever it is, and if there's no DNA and all this stuff, it becomes extremely hard for a person that goes through that to get caught, or even, and not just that, they're not believed, they're afraid, they're threatened. There's so many factors that go into this. Anyhow, he ended up getting reported. I'm not sure exactly how it came out, but a lot of it was because he recorded himself. I think it was like an 18-minute video of him abusing the niece, or not the niece. It was his a daughter of the, like his, I guess it was a niece. I'm not sure what the label was, but it was some kind of niece.
Family relation.
Yes. And he recorded it because obviously he was a videographer. He added music to it. It was very gory, like not very the way he did it. But not only that, but he also had a 12-year-old boy helping him to abuse this girl. So he groomed this other boy to kind of do the same thing towards the girl, the niece. And the evidence was there, and there was a lot of testimony, not just from the niece but other girls that came forward as well. And he ended up getting convicted, and I think he got a long time. I don't know, the game like 90 something 100 years, I forget how long. He was already kind of a predator because he had got convicted before when he was a juvenile for also raping a cousin or some kind of niece, and he had done 2 years in camp, or 2.5 years. So he had a history of it already. So there's something already there that was mentally wrong, right? And that kind of tainted the whole quinceañera thing. But I don't know if the family ever disconnected from it, or if they just kind of pretend it didn't happen. I don't know. Because you were there after it happened or before?
What year was he convicted?
2010, around there?
I've gone to the shop post the conviction to have alterations on clothes. Mind you, everyone, I didn't know. I really didn't know about it, the conviction and what had happened. I want to say that when I went in there as a guest at the venue, it was pre-2010 because it was like my homegirl days.
And mind you, I'm not the family. I'm not blaming them for what he did. I don't know, like at all, what their side of it was, and I don't want to blame them. Obviously, he was convicted, and that's it right there. But obviously, they still have their business, so it didn't impact them or anything like that. But it was just weird.
I think it probably didn't impact because I think in general, not many, there's been rumors. I remember hearing rumors a couple years back, and maybe a couple years back, but nothing set in stone. And you know how rumors start, and we don't always know if they're true. I think that people just don't really know. And I don't think that the family's business should fail because of something that they had no control over and they weren't responsible for. But I also do feel, and I don't know this, so please don't say this is just my opinion, and this is generalizing, not just about this family, that if somehow a parent or a relative knew that there was a person that their loved one was either being abused or that their loved one was abusive, I think that if they had them in the public and gave them opportunity to be around vulnerable people, then they share a little bit of that guilt in a sense. And maybe not a prison guilt. They don't deserve to go to prison, but they definitely deserve to have that guilt. on their mind. And if their business failed for it, then that's just a product of their own what their lack of responsibility or so forth and so on.
Right, and we
In my opinion.
yeah, of course, and we just have to realize with being mature adults that if we do have loved ones that commit crimes, we got to take accountability for in acknowledging that they did commit a crime. And if they're going to be open to changing in the future, that they acknowledge that they did commit crimes, and the victims have to be acknowledged, right? That there's people that were victims of this, right? And as families, I know people tend to blame victims and stuff like that a lot, but you have to get to that maturity level and understanding to be like, okay, the person that we know did a crime and they acknowledge it, and I also acknowledge that there are victims involved, and all you could do is get better and move forward, right?
Yeah, I would say that sex crimes are a little different in that people who commit sex crimes are a different kind of offender because it's something psychological. They can't. It's an urge that they don't stop. And when you have a loved one that commits a sex crime, I think that if you're going to keep them with you or near you or your home or your business, then you have to also take on the responsibility of the fact that they're possibly exposed to your clientele or to your neighbors, and you have to think about that. Now, I'm not saying that they don't deserve to live their life if they've, paid for their crime, but what I'm saying is that they will offend again. The likelihood of them offending again is very high. So
yeah, and that's actually factually speaking, that happens a lot with sex offenders. There's a lot of repetition. I can't say every single one, but it shows that there is more repetition toward that. Again, it could be a brain type of issue, and there has to be more treatment for that, or chemical treatment. And I'm not going to get into like they need to be castrated and all this stuff.
Yeah, we're not doctors, and we're not suggesting anything like that.
Right, but it's just there has been a lot of repetition with those offenders for whatever reason, due to brain chemical imbalances or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, and with these two stories in the East Side, they have these two factors placed, and it doesn't help either that there in the East Side there is a street called Flint Street where they house sex offenders, and the reason that they do that is because, again, it's back to the industrial area and there's nowhere else. So that probably adds on to that. But I know that Wilmington, the residents have fought against that. They don't want them near, the area, living in that's their vicinity. However, I guess there's really nowhere more industrial place to go than right there.
Yeah.
And it's been a battle. It was a battle of, some years ago between the residents and law enforcement and whatnot, placing people near there, because there are still families that live around, and it's just big. It's really a slippery slope with that.
It is. It really is. And so I think with the today's episode in our podcast, we definitely wanted to highlight some of the weird eeriness that there is on the East Side. But we also want to, as women and, mother, aunt, and so forth, wanted to just remind you to be mindful of your surroundings anywhere, not just in Wilmington, anywhere. And we're definitely, I love Wilmington.
Yeah.
I love Wilmington as a grown woman, and meaning that, like, I see that it's like a diamond in the rough. And we have to remember that Wilmington was one of the very first cities in the greater Los Angeles. And if we didn't have Wilmington, we wouldn't have the booming economy that we have today. And we definitely need to praise Wilmington and Banning for all of that. And I love Eat at Rudy's. It's like one of the favorite breakfast spots to go. It's the best little spot right there. So in no way, shape, or form are we putting Wilmington down. We just wanted to talk about how Wilmington on the east side has got some strange kind of energy
Yeah,
around
strange
it.
energy. I would say that strange energy. So it needs to be cleansed.
Definitely. And I love these art walks and Day of the Dead and all the different little festivals that they're bringing in. I think that that's what we need. I think the community, when they go to work and they come home, they lock the doors for many years and didn't really come out because it's so active, gang wise and other criminal activity going on in that area, especially. And I think that once the residents take up in arms and say, hey, this is where we live, this is where we want our family to live, we've been here for generations, we don't want this anymore, that's when change happens. And you can see some of it, and it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. There is one last incident though that did happen that is more recent, and it's not even more recent as it was already from 2012, which is good that there's not bigger incidents happening.
At least
But
none that we know of that have been televised, right?
yeah, so the last story we'll share is the death of a young lady named Christy Alvarez, and that happened again in 2012, and she was found pretty much stabbed on L Street on McFarland and Hyatt, down the street from the liquor store that has all the Chicano murals and stuff, near the train tracks. So it was not far from the where the suicide family happened, like literally a block away, up the street from the down the up the street from the church, and right in the middle of the train tracks. There's train tracks that cross that area there. It's a big Alameda corridor. They go right through there. Those tracks are still active for imports, exports, train business. So she was found there, pretty pretty much dead in one day. So the story with her. Do you remember yourself when that story happened, or did you know later when we went back?
You know, you honestly, I don't recall that story being televised or high profile. Where I remember hearing about it via, the news or media. I don't recall it.
When I first heard the story, it was also very disturbing because I remember when I heard it too. Because I remember hearing, I think there was friends or neighbors talking about it because it was like very gruesome type of thing where people were saying that they heard like a lady screaming at night, like that. It was, it was the word was that there was a lady screaming, and it almost sounded like a baby crying. But I guess when you get stabbed in your throat area, it kind of distorts your vocal cords and stuff like that. So I guess that's what was happening during the incident, which is like very, wow.
Yeah, it just gave me the chills right now when you said that.
Yeah. So the neighbor that heard the screams thought it was a baby or something like that. So it was a mystery for a long time. They found her. The story was that she was a mother of a couple of children, and she apparently worked at a bakery early hours, and I guess they were saying that she was going to work, and then they don't really know what happened much after that, and then they just found her dead like the next day when there was somebody walking their dog through that area and found her dead. And then there was a trial. So what happened? They found the person that did it. Maybe I don't want to. I can't say the timeline to when, but they did eventually find the perpetrator, and his name was Angel Guerabello. Angel Guerabello. And there was a trial, and it did go to trial. So it took a few years, probably more than a year, to get through the trial and everything like that. So the interesting part was that this person was ended up getting caught because I guess they told their friend one time while they're cleaning out his car that he brought it up. I guess. Oh, I ended up fucking this girl up, like, because she was trying to take over my spot. So when I was reading through the court documents, and the family apparently didn't know this either. I don't know, but I guess there was video surveillance of. They were saying that Chrissy was a sex worker. I didn't know that till I read some of the documents, the appeal documents. But apparently, she was leaning towards that because she wanted to move and help the family out. I don't know. We can't say because this is what's on record that they're using that, like, from. I guess what happened was what they were saying on record was that she, in the early hours. I'll read what it says. Christy Alvarez left home at 4:40 a.m. and at 5:50 surveillance seen her walking in the area. Sorry, in the early morning of January 2nd, 2012, Christy Alvarez left home and drove to an area where she worked as a sex worker. A surveillance camera recorded her car parked and captured Alvarez walking in the area between 4:40 a.m. and 5 o'clock a.m. Between 4:45 a.m. and 5:30 a.m., a white car resembling the car driven by Goyarbelo, another sex worker, also worked in the area, drove past the same surveillance camera 3 times. And then at 4:45 a.m., a resident in the apartment across the street from the nearby rail yard heard a woman scream, and that was the screams that I heard, and a car resembling Guayabelo's car parked at the yard. The resident saw and made eye contact with the driver, who the resident looked like a Hispanic man in his 30s. Later that day, a woman walking a dog discovered Alvarez's body in the rail yard. Investigators determined Alvarez died from blunt force trauma to the head and a deep knife wound to her neck. So that's kind of how it came up that, she was trying to make money to help the family. There was the person that killed her was jealous of her beauty and upset about her being in her same area and ended up killing her. That's what the court documents say. Um, so it was very odd, like kind of that new twist, which I didn't know about that. But when I looked further during the test trial, the family also didn't know. So, but they did bring it up to the family and they didn't know. But regardless, it doesn't mean that she should have been killed,
Yeah,
right?
it doesn't take off the painful fact that she's gone and she didn't deserve to die, and especially not that way.
No. The twist to it too was that the person that killed her described himself as a transgender woman. Um, apparently during the murder they were not transitioned yet, and they transitioned during their incarceration. Maybe they dressed like a woman but weren't transitioned fully. I don't know the details about that, but I know during the trial, the brother was during his statement was really obviously upset and kind of was upset at the fact that they transitioned into a woman during incarceration, and they like all almost to get pity. I guess he was making it like, to get pity because they were a woman. They described himself as a woman now, and he was feeling like it was a manipulative thing. Um, but I mean, maybe that person did live as a woman but transitioned during the thing. Whatever it was, it still was very wrong as far as like the whole thing anyway.
Yes, and very brutal.
Yeah, so that person is still appealing their case, the offender, and I mean, they're appealing it for various reasons because I guess they told their friend what happened, like I was telling you, and now the offender is saying that the friend was coerced and all kinds of things, and they have a right to appeal, so they're trying to appeal it. It didn't work out. They're upholding the sentence, so that's kind of what it is. But it's interesting because right there on L Street, they have kept the memory of Christy, whoever the family is, keeps her name there, flowers, and there's always things right there showing that she's remembered.
There is. It's nice to see. And a stark reminder, again, not to backtrack too much, but just be careful of your surroundings and always let someone know where you're going to be at and where you're going. And it's not it's a good thing because you just never know.
Right. So as you can see, the east side of it has the history from its foundation of the Banning House and Phineas creating Wilmington, right? So there's very deep roots that are there. So that's very already a statement there. You know, this is where Wilmington was birthed, right? And then
Definitely.
now it also has that dark side to it where a lot of things have occurred that have, I think, gave it that negative energy that kind of still comes out here and there. And I mean, there's several factors. I mean, again, it's industrial. There might be, there's not many resources there. It's kind of forgotten. So many reasons, right?
All of them attribute to that negative feeling, that eerie feeling, and that lost feeling.
Right. However, things, you know, have gotten better over the years as far as less, I guess, killings and stuff like that. So that's a good thing. I know LA, you know, lately has been having a lot of crimes in the summertime mostly happening, but it has definitely lessened since the 80s and 90s. So hopefully it doesn't go to those levels. But I mean, like you said earlier, there are groups of people that do want to bring a different light to Wilmington, and especially that area.
Yeah. Shout out to a history collector. When we have people on, we interviewed him in one of our podcasts, and he definitely wanted to reminisce about his experience in the drum barracks, which is just down the street from Banning. There's really positive things there. Again, we're not, dumping on the city. We love the city, hence the reason why we're talking about it. We appreciate the city, but we have to also describe, the pros and the cons, the good and the bad. And they are revitalizing the Wilmington, what is it, the Wilmington Historical Society.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so with that, it can shine a new light into the city where you can see its roots and we can see its dark, underbelly of criminal activity and or dark history. But then we can also come together and we can make it better. And it's really just up to us.
Yeah, that's true. And just hopefully the getting more resources into Wilmington. But yeah, even like with history, we can't. It's not always like rainbows and butterflies, right?
And hence the reason why we need the critical race theory. It's not. There's the beautiful Phineas Banning coming here, but what happened to the indigenous people on the land before he was here? What about all the years coming? What about the fact that we have some of the biggest polluters, the
Refineries.
the refineries. And I mean, in Wilmington, right there off of what is that, Lomita, the carousels, which is not that far from the area we're talking about, and it's really close to where I live as well. That whole the carousel community, a lot of them had cancer because they were built on top of like toxic waste. I mean, this is just a shitty. It's a great place, and they've done so much shitty ass stuff to it.
Yep.
And we're just like forgotten in the harbor area. When you think of the harbor area, I don't know. I think people maybe think of San Pedro, and that's all they think of. The fish market. Going on Sundays to the fish market. Maybe that's all they think about. And it's amazing. It's got a rich history, but it also has a very ugly history that hopefully, we can make. We'll never forget about it, and we have to talk about it, because if we forget about it, then how do we know how to continue to make it better?
Yes, and yeah, you're right. Like, there's other factors too, like the refineries and that are hurting people in other ways, right? With pollution and toxins. There's been several explosions in Wilmington that have hurt people, not just with cancer, but like their homes, because there's been explosions that literally destroyed windows and all kinds of stuff. It's really weird and scary. And there are advocates that try to regulate these refineries to make sure that the levels of toxins are not super high, because at one time you could smell Wilmington. It was very smelly because of all the pollution that there was there. And now it's better, so much better. And there was a lot of oil production, so there used to be a lot of oil derricks in people's yards and whatnot, and there's just like a lot of that. So it people that have been on top of that have been doing great. But yeah, definitely like people that are the council members and all those people that just focus on the pretty cities need to really not be so turn their back to places like Wilmington.
Yeah, get their thumbs out of their asses and start like raising their hands for donations. And we really, and a lot of, to be fair, a lot of the refineries and other programs around here are giving back to the community. Is it enough? I don't know. I think they could probably do better, and we need to make the companies that work in our area accountable for the citizens, and we just need to continue.
Right. Yeah. And not just to like criminalize or demonize, Wilmington, but also just in the way what prevents that resources, more attention, more beautifying and stuff like that to the place.
Education.
Education, psychoeducation, life skills education, health education, so many things that could help some of these things be prevented.
Transportation.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could go on and on with that, but
On
yeah.
and on.
So, thank you for listening to these stories from the East Side, and if there's any interesting, odd, dark history from wherever you live in this area, let us know. And follow us on Beyond the Facade podcast. Follow me, Doña Junta, on Swap Me Chronicles. You could say your handles.
Yeah, follow me at Observing Spooks and Other Vices. You can just type it in like that. There's underscores too, but I don't think it's necessary. So just Observing Spooks and Other Vices. You can follow my personal page, but it's just selfies. So it's better to go to Observing Spooks. So don't forget, we're on YouTube. You can find us on YouTube too.
Yeah, so some of the people that are more visual, we're on YouTube. When we'll get a studio, then we'll be popping. But
we're in the works. But you guys have to be kind of active too, and let us know what you want to hear, so we can make sure that we're pushing out content that you want. Otherwise, we're going to continue doing what we want, and we love that shit anyway. So.
Yes. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.